fellow who, I don't know if you read this. I did. He said 4 months.
So be very cautious of getting involved.
Okay, I'd like to call the Budget Committee to order, please. Good afternoon, everyone, and our apologies for starting a little bit late. And the reason we started a little bit late is that we had a closed meeting, and to begin this afternoon, I need a motion to reconvene into open session. Councillor Fox and Councillor Armstrong, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Okay, opening remarks. I don't really have any opening remarks. We know what's ahead of us. We know what we need to do. Today is the last meeting before Budget Day, which is January 22nd. We are continuing to receive input through our Engage platform, and we have about 10 delegations later on this afternoon, starting at 6 o'clock, who are providing input into the budget as well. So the only decisions we'll make today are with respect to user rates. All other decisions will not be made until January 22nd. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Dyer to take us through the presentation and the budget update.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the third Budget Committee meeting of this fall as we work our way through the 2020 budget process. In terms of today's agenda, I'm going to move through some of this fairly quickly, given our delayed start. We're going to go through the water and wastewater recommendations and approval. We'll then turn our attention back to the tax-supported budget, give you an overview of a couple of the two information papers that are on today's agenda. You'll receive a presentation from police staff, and then as indicated by the chair, we have a second public input meeting scheduled to start at 6 p.m. And in terms of where we're at, in terms of the overall process, working our way through the Budget Committee review, obviously, and public input, and then that will lead us into the approval stage, user rates today, tax budget on January 22nd, and then we'll move into our variance reporting and monitoring cycle. So with respect to user rate budgets, just a brief overview. We went through these in some detail at the previous meeting back on November 26th, including presentations from water services staff, some additional information from me in my presentation, and we had, I think, 3 information papers that were on that agenda, which provided detailed overviews of the water supply, wastewater treatment, and water distribution and collection budgets that are proposed for 2020. Excuse me. So as a reminder, in terms of the recommended rate adjustments for January 1st of 2020, 1.9% on water supply, 3.9% for wastewater treatment, and then 4.9 and 3.9 for both water distribution and wastewater collection, respectively. Each of those proposed adjustments is slightly less than the originally contemplated or projected increases for 2020 that we would have last shown back in the 2019 budget. And I think we've been through, the reasons for those adjustments on a wholesale perspective. The total impact on a typical household is about $14 per year. We did have a request at the previous meeting for some information about MBN Canada information relating to water services, and so we've shown, we've got a couple of slides here that shows how we compare to the 2 other two-tier water and wastewater systems in Ontario, being Niagara and York. Our rates, so this is total cost for treatment and distribution of drinking water. Of course, as you can see in the chart, the Waterloo falls in the middle, roughly, of Niagara and York, and therefore we become the median in a 3-municipality sample of water rates. So you can see how we compare on both the water side and then on slide 9, similarly with the wastewater side, just slightly above the rates from Niagara and lower than the regions than the region of York. And again, those are the only other two-tier systems that we would typically compare ourselves to in Ontario. We talked a little bit about flows. I thought just, before we get into the recommendations, just a reminder that on the flow side, what we're seeing on both water and wastewater is a reduction in flows. So you think about, the math to calculate the rate. We've got expenditures on the numerator and the flows on the denominator. And so built into budgets over the last 4 or 5 years has been a steadily, reducing amount of flows on both water and wastewater, which you can see here, measured on the left-hand side in millions of cubic meters, and a fairly, slow but steady decline from 2016. And on the wastewater, again, a fairly consistent decline going back to 2015. So we're gradually adjusting those flows to better align with our actuals. You can see here actual flows have been below budget over the last 5 years. We're gradually bringing the flow volumes down in order to align with what our experience is. We spent a little bit of time over the last couple of meetings talking about capital. So just as a very quick reminder, our messages on the capital side for water and wastewater is that on the user rate side, the non-growth portion, we believe we're in very good shape, and you can see that here looking at the 10-year water capital program. On the user rate side, the vast majority funded through pay-as-you-go funding, through user rate revenues collected over the course of the year, and funded then from reserve, a small amount of debt. Our concern remains on the growth-related side and the amount of debt we anticipate issuing over the next 10 years, and it's exactly the same situation in wastewater. Very good shape on the user rate side, less so on the development charge side. And how that translates into risk for the region is with respect to it potentially leads to an over-reliance on long-term debt. And to the extent that we issue debt on the development charge side, we have to fund those debt servicing costs from development charges. And so we use this measure of looking at the percentage of annual collections that are required to fund debt servicing costs. We're already in the 50% range for wastewater. We're projecting that's going to stay relatively flat over the next several years. We are anticipating the need to issue growth-related debt for water starting in 2021. And that would lead us, up to in the range of 30%. So this is an important measure for us. It's an important measure from a long-term sustainability perspective, and one that you'll be hearing more about as we move forward.
Craig, I'm just going to ask you to pause right there. We have a question. Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question actually goes back to the comparison of the two-tier water systems. So, is it safe for me to assume that Niagara is, and I don't know, Nancy maybe has to answer this, Niagara is more surface water than, that we're primarily groundwater, they're surface water, so they would be cheaper? I mean, they're fairly substantially cheaper. Is that an assumption I can make?
I understand that to be correct.
And so, and then was it York or was it Peel, the third? York?
York, Niagara, Waterloo, and York.
Are they like us, groundwater? Or combination? So we're a combination, but we're tilted towards groundwater.
Yeah. York is unique in that they purchase water from 2 municipalities, Toronto and Region of Peel.
So that's...
Yeah, so they have some very long pipelines that they have to pay for and some very large booster systems to pump the water across into their system.
Okay,
and they do have groundwater as well.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, just moving ahead to slide 13 or 14. I'm just going to get myself caught up here again. So key messages with respect to the user rate budgets. Rate adjustments lower than projections from last year, declining flow volumes on both the water and wastewater side. Non-growth capital, we believe we're in very good shape, generally sufficiently funded, and our challenge and attention continues to be on the growth-related capital side. And so we have recommendations included in today's budget package, pages 11 and 12 of the budget agenda. And collectively, those recommendations would be to approve the 2020 operating budgets for water and wastewater, So water supply, wastewater treatment, water distribution, wastewater collection, approval of the 20 to 29 capital programs, which is essentially approval of 2020 and the remaining years approved as a forecast, and approval of the wholesale and retail rates. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so page 11 of today's agenda, there's two motions.
Excluding police at